all of our jurors and alternates have returned to the courtroom in People v. Robert Durst. Mr. Durst is present. Mr. Chesnoff is here with him. We have Mr. Lewin and Mr. Miata, Mr. Bailey, and Mr. DeGuerin is over there in the corner. And Ms. Newman has resumed the witness stand, and I'll remind you that you're under oath. Mr. Chesnoff, you may resume your cross-examination of the witness.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Before I begin, Mr. Lewin and I worked out a stipulation with respect to the January 22nd, 2001 interview of Ms. Newman by Detective Stevens and Coulter. And we're going to, with your permission, Your Honor, I'm going to read the contents. Mr. Lewin's agreeing that these are statements that were made by Ms. Newman at the time. And we're also stipulating that at no time during the initial interview did she ever discuss Kathy's disappearance or any of the facts surrounding it.
Yeah, very well.
Thank you. What she did say was the following. The above witness stated that she had known the victim, Susan Berman, since 1976 in New York City. During that time, she would see Berman at least once a month. In 1980, Newman moved to Los Angeles. Berman moved to Los Angeles in 1982 or 1983. While in Los Angeles, Newman saw Berman more frequently and visited her at the Benedict Canyon Drive when Berman was married to her husband, Mr. However, the visits became less frequent after Newman's marriage and the birth of her children approximately 11 years ago. That's 11 years from 2001. Newman stated that she had not been to the Benedict Canyon residence while Berman has lived there this second time around. Newman stated that she and Berman spoke by telephone about every 3 weeks. Newman last spoke to Berman by telephone on Friday, December 22nd, 2000 at 1400 hours. Berman had telephoned Newman and they discussed updates on career events, pending deals, and general gossip about the people they worked with. The conversation lasted about 40 minutes. Berman did not discuss any recent problems with anybody. Newman knew that Berman was in a bad financial situation and that she personally loaned her money on 3 occasions. Her previous loans were for $1,000 and $3,000 approximately 5 years ago. The most recent loan was approximately 18 months ago when Newman loaned her $1,800. Newman stated that Berman had repaid the previous loans and still owed $700 on the recent loan. Newman stated she never insisted on repayment. However, Berman always insisted on paying the loans back with interest. Newman also stated that Berman had told her that Bobby Durst was always bailing her out. Berman had confided to her that Paul Kaufman had forced her to take out several mortgages on the house on coin, causing her to lose the property. Newman stated that Berman had never told her that she was afraid of anyone. Thank you, Your Honor.
And Your Honor, the stipulation would be that this is information that was provided by Laraine Newman during the January 22nd, 2001 interview. So stipulated?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, court accepts the stipulation, and you may now resume your cross-examination.
How do you prevent your glasses from fogging? Okay, welcome back. You had 2 interviews with the police, is that correct?
Are you counting the 2015?
15, yes.
Yes, 2.
Okay. One in January of '01, correct?
Yes.
And that was approximately 30 days after Ms. Berman's death, correct?
I couldn't say. I don't remember, but if that's what you have, then I'm sure that's right.
And then the second one was in September of 2015 with Mr. Lewin and Detective Shamalian, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and these statements, as far as you know, were typed into reports or into transcripts, is that correct?
Okay, yes.
Okay, and the reason that's done is so that years later, if you're on a witness stand, there's a record of what you said in case you don't remember, correct?
All right, yes.
Okay. Before testifying yesterday, how were you contacted and told to come to court?
By Mr. Lewin and Detective Thornton.
Detective
Thornton.
Thornton, okay. And in that conversation, did Mr. Lewin go over the questions that he was going to be asking you yesterday?
Yesterday, or when are you referring to?
Did he ask you when he called you to tell you to come to court? Did he go over the questions that he would then be asking you once you got to court?
Not the most recent call, no.
What call is the one where he did that?
Can you tell me? I don't remember. I don't remember how many conversations I've had with Mr. Lewin. One of those conversations was to prepare me for what questions might be asked of me.
Okay, and you said you had multiple conversations with Mr. Lewin, correct?
Yes,
And they were over the course of what, the last several years?
yes,
And would you say you had 20 conversations with him?
no,
How about 10?
no,
Okay, did you have more than 2?
yes,
Okay, and in those conversations, Mr. Lewin would go over with you what he intended to ask you, correct?
Your Honor, that question is compound, it's vague, it assumes facts not in evidence regarding conversations, plural. May I have one moment, Your Honor?
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it.
Okay.
May I proceed, Your Honor? You overruled that last objection, correct? Would you please answer?
To the best of my recollection, I've had one conversation with Mr. Lewin regarding questions that he is going to ask me.
And did he also talk to you about questions that I might ask you?
Not exactly, no. He just made it clear to me that there were certain things that you're responsible for in terms of proof, but I can't remember what he said.
Okay, so you're having trouble even remembering the conversations you had with Mr. Lewin, which occurred within at least the last couple of years, correct?
You're lumping in conversations
Okay.
over a period of years and one that was that happened 2 weeks ago.
The one that happened 2 weeks ago.
Okay, I remember most of it.
Okay, well, did he go over the questions that you would be asked by me and what he thought I would ask?
Not exactly, no.
Well, did he give you your transcript from your 2015 interview with him and Mr. Shamalian to review before you testified?
He reviewed it, parts of it, with me over the phone.
Okay, you never got given a hard copy?
No,
Okay, so Mr. Lewin would pick the parts of your conversation from 2015 and prepare you to come and testify to the jury, correct?
you could say that, yes.
Okay, and he was the one who chose those portions of the interview he conducted in 2015 as the questions and the proposed answers that you would give when you testified here, didn't he?
Not the proposed answers,
Well,
just the
did-
questions.
Did he remind you during this prep session that you had
Your Honor,
never...
I'm going to object to the term prep session, it's argumentative.
Did he tell you during this prep session that you had never, in your recorded statement in 2015, ever said that Kathy had told you that Mr. Durst had said there was an accident? Did he tell you that? Remind you of that?
That assumes facts not in evidence, Your Honor.
Well, it's, I guess it tell you that.
Well,
So
short
what
of-
the questions of the attorney.
No,
attorneys
Your
are
Honor,
not-
the question
hold on.
mentions Kathy, Your Honor.
I-
Kathy giving a statement, that's the...
So, so I think you meant to say Susan,
I did.
right? So that's
Correct.
part of the problem.
I apologize.
Okay.
So when he was
Maybe
preparing
that's
you...
all of the problem, I'm not sure. Okay.
That was why I objected, Your Honor.
Okay, so rephrase then.
Thank you, Your Honor. So when he was preparing you to testify, did he ever tell you that in 2015 you had never told them anything about Kathy's disappearance involving an accident? Did he tell you that?
It was never mentioned in the 2001 interview.
I'm
You have to-
I'm talking about, did he ever tell you that you never mentioned the word accident with respect to...
That's correct.
Okay. The person who brought up accident in the 2015 interview was a hypothetical presented to you by Mr. Lewin, wasn't it?
I honestly don't remember him presenting that to me.
Okay, well, we'll get to it.
All right.
Thank you. So, Mr. Lewin doesn't give you your statement to review, but he's the source of your memory of what happened in 2015, correct?
Question's argumentative and assumes facts not in evidence.
Overruled. You can deny it or make three.
Restate that, please.
You did not get a copy of your statement to review,
That's
correct?
correct.
So anything about the 2015 interview that you were reminded of came from Mr. Lewin.
That's correct.
And I guess the same would apply, did he go over your statement in 2001?
Somewhat, yes.
Did he give you a copy of that?
No.
So the only things you remembered about 2001 were a result of Mr. Lewin telling you information that he chose from 2001, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, they recorded your prior interview in 2015. Were you aware of that?
No.
Okay. Is this the first time you're finding that out?
No, I was made aware of that the last time I spoke to Mr. Lewin when he was prepping me for testimony.
And he was telling you kind of had to be careful about what you say because there's a record of it, correct?
You're stating that in a way that wasn't presented to me by Mr. Lewin.
Okay, well, he told you it was recorded, correct?
Yes.
And he told you that you would be asked questions by me, correct?
Yes.
And he told you that I would have the recording, correct?
I don't remember him telling me you would have the recording.
Okay. Assuming I had the recording, and you know that there's a recording, then you would know that you had to...
Adhere to it.
Thank
Yes.
you. Now, you agreed to the 2001 interview when the police contacted you, didn't you?
Yes.
Okay. And this is because these policemen were investigating the death of your friend, correct?
Yes.
And you went and met with them, or they came to you, do you remember?
I went to the police station.
Okay. And you also agreed to the 2015 interview, correct?
I suppose I did. I didn't realize it was an interview, but yeah.
Okay. And in fact, to be quite candid, you told Mr. Lewin you wish you weren't being interviewed, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And this was about the same circumstances, the death of Susan Berman, correct?
That was the topic, yes.
Okay. Now, are you aware from personal knowledge that there have been newspaper articles and movies, TV shows, magazines, all about the theories of the events surrounding Susan's death?
Yes.
Okay. Have you consumed some of those things?
Quite by accident, I saw All Good Things.
That's a fictional movie, correct?
Correct. Well, supposedly.
Yeah, well,
I recognized the elements of the story as I was watching it. I did not know what I was watching, and as things unfolded, I realized that's what I was watching.
so this was a movie made for sale, for the public, for entertainment, with stars in it, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it was something you got to see, correct?
Yes.
And it presented a version of events surrounding the disappearance of Kathy, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And you watched that, correct?
I did.
And that was actually produced by the same fellows who made the film for HBO called The Jinx.
Yes.
And in fact, the fellows from the show, the HBO show, they actually tried to talk to you, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
And you told them you didn't want to talk to them, didn't you?
Yes.
And one of the big reasons you didn't want to talk to them is in the fictional All Good Things, they had the nerve to suggest that Susan Berman had blackmailed Mr. Durst, correct?
That's correct.
And you were indignant about that, weren't you?
Yes.
Because you didn't believe for a minute, 1 minute, that Susan Berman would ever extort a friend of hers.
That's correct.
Now, you talked on direct about some things that you remembered about Susan telling you about being an alibi. You remember that?
Yes.
Okay. At the time, did you ever make any notes about that?
No.
Did you keep a diary?
No.
Okay. Most importantly, you ever tell the police at that time?
No.
Now, you knew from Susan that she had been a spokesperson for Mr. Durst when his wife disappeared, correct?
Let me think about that.
Please.
I don't recall her ever telling me that she had been a spokesperson. In what capacity do you mean?
Public relations.
No, she did
Okay.
not tell me that.
Well, let me ask it to you this way. I'll do what my colleague does. I'll put it in the form of a hypothetical. Okay? Assuming that Susan Berman had been a spokesperson for Mr. Durst, communicating with the press and maybe even law enforcement at the time his wife disappeared, would it surprise you that she played that role because of her knowledge of the news world?
I mean, again, I wasn't aware that she did any of this. I'm not sure what you mean by spokesperson.
Okay.
But she was certainly savvy about the news world. I would acknowledge that.
Okay, so use the word alibi. Alibi doesn't necessarily mean something sinister, does it?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay. So, for example, if you took your wife to the train station because you didn't want her to drive and she'd been drinking too much, and she left on the train as far as you know and then disappears, if Susan talked about that, that could be an alibi, couldn't it?
Certainly.
Okay. And really, an alibi is evidence that demonstrates that a person or a citizen in an investigation was somewhere other than the scene of the crime, correct?
Yes.
So in this instance, if Mr. Durst was in Connecticut after having placed his wife on a train headed to New York City when she disappeared,
That assumes facts not in evidence.
that could be an alibi, correct?
Restate that, please?
Sure. If Mr. Durst was in Connecticut after having placed his wife on a train headed to New York City when she disappeared, that could be an alibi that Susan presented, correct?
Improper hypothetical, Your Honor.
So, if there isn't evidence of that now, but if it were introduced, if it is not introduced, you may later move to strike the hypothetical. In other words, I control the order of proof. I'll allow the hypothetical based on a subsequent presentation of the evidence that would support this. It's for the jury to determine whether the evidence is true or false, but based on the idea that it would be introduced, then Mr. Chesnoff may ask that hypothetical question. You may repeat it, or if you remember the question.
Well, you're describing a situation where Mr. Durst saw his wife off from Connecticut to New York on a train.
Right, and that could be an alibi, correct?
It could be. It was never told to me.
No, I understand that. Nothing was ever told to you, really. According to your first interview and your second interview with Mr. Lewin.
That's argument also calls for a factual conclusion.
Whoa, hold on. For a factual conclusion. I think it's argument, though, so sustain.
Okay. Now let's discuss the first interview that you did on January 22nd, and that's what we just stipulated to. That interview, you would agree, was close in time to Susan's death, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You acknowledge at the time that you had less frequent visits with Susan after you were married, correct?
Yes.
And you told the detectives at that time that the last time you spoke to Susan was on the 22nd of December, that's what we just stipulated to, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And you said you talked about career updates, pending deals, and general gossip, correct?
yes, correct.
You told the policeman that that conversation lasted 40 minutes, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And, importantly, during that 40-minute conversation, a few days before Susan dies, she did not tell you that she was having any problems with anybody, correct?
Your Honor, I need to approach, it's an objection that would require a speaking objection, which I don't want to give.
All right. One brief moment. We'll do it off the record and on the record. Necessary, we'll do it on the record.
Ms. Newman, you were here when the stipulation was read to the jury, correct? Just before we started?
yes,
Okay. Did that help refresh your recollection as to what you told the police back in 2001?
yeah, there were other things I have recalled also that were discussed.
Okay, but, so when I asked you whether or not you had a 40-minute discussion with your friend, and she told you that she was not having any problems with anybody, you remember telling that to the police, don't you?
Yes, that was not discussed at all.
No.
She never said that.
Right. She never said she was having any problems with
Correct.
anybody.
That's right.
Thank you. They even asked you if she'd been fighting or quarreling with anybody. Do you remember that?
They asked me if she had been quarreling with her landlady.
Okay.
Motion, Your Honor, motion to strike the answer.
Overruled.
Yeah, the court's prior.
I know, overruled.
I won't go any further.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, yesterday, and if I'm wrong, I'm sure Mr. Lewin will correct it on when he gets up again, but yesterday I remember you saying that you really didn't discuss Mr. Durst with the police back in 2001. Do you remember testifying to that yesterday?
Yes, I do.
Okay. But you heard the stipulation today that said Newman, oh wait, let me find the exact quote. I'm sorry. Don't want to. 1 second, please. Court's indulgence. Newman also stated that Berman had told her that Bobby Durst was always bailing her out.
Yes,
Okay, so yesterday when you said the subject of Mr. Durst never came up, that wasn't completely accurate, was it?
I'm confused by what you're asking me.
Okay, I'll try to do better. Yesterday, Mr. Lewin questioned you,
Yes,
You told him that the police didn't talk to you about Robert Durst in 2001. Remember that?
Yes,
But now, having heard the stipulation and refreshed your recollection, you do in fact remember that there was a discussion about Mr. Durst always bailing her out, correct?
that was in the transcript from 2001.
Yes,
Then I must have said it.
okay. So
I forgot.
it's fine. So, at the time that you would have said that to the police, and Mr. Durst's name did come up, did you jump up and tell the police, by the way, Susan Berman told me that Kathy was involved in the accident, that Mr. Durst was involved in the accidental death of his wife?
No,
Okay. So, back in time, what's that, 20 years ago, based on a conversation that you had had years before, which you remembered yesterday, at the time that the policemen who were investigating the death of your friend talked about Robert Durst with you, you never said a word about that, did you?
that's correct.
Let me ask you this. Knowing Susan Berman's financial situation, in December of 2000, do you think getting $50,000 from Mr. Durst during the holidays would have provided her with some huge relief from whatever her circumstances were?
I knew nothing about that, so
That wasn't the question.
I knew nothing about how difficult her situation was. I knew that, you know, she had to get rid of her house on coin, but I did not know how bad things were when she was at Benedict Canyon.
Okay. Would you agree that in the year 2000, receiving $50,000 at Christmas time would be a help to anybody?
Absolutely.
Now, I told you yesterday that the question of your substance abuse was not a personal attack. It's an issue when it comes to memory.
Certainly.
And you yourself recognize that.
Absolutely.
So with that said, you started using drugs when you were 14. Is that correct?
13.
13. 1965?
Now, that's math. Don't introduce math,
Okay.
because,
All right, well, will you
Yeah.
take my word for it? It's
yes,
like-
I will.
Okay, and you used regularly until 1987.
Correct.
Okay, so my math's not that great either. So that's something like, what, 22 years?
It's
Something like-
21 years.
21 years. And you were living here in Los Angeles?
Yes,
And 67, 68 was what they called Summer of Love? Is that a yes?
yes,
And at that time, there was a great deal of drug activity, correct?
yeah, but at that time, it was simply marijuana, some psychedelics, that's it.
Okay, and were you consuming marijuana?
Yes,
And were you consuming some psychedelics?
rarely, but yes,
LSD,
yes,
mescaline,
yes,
peyote,
no,
mushrooms?
no,
Okay, so LSD and mescaline,
mescaline,
which
yes,
cause hallucinations, correct?
yes,
Okay, and you would agree with me that when you're 16 or 17 years old, your brain probably hasn't fully developed, has it?
that's correct.
And so taking hallucinogens at a time when your brain is in development can cause impairment, can it not?
With the frequency that I took it, I don't know, I don't think so.
Okay. How often were you smoking pot?
I probably smoked pot every day.
Okay. So that's every day when you're 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, that's a lot of days, isn't it?
Yes,
Okay, so
stopped
you-
when I was 19.
Okay, so you were basically high through high school.
Yes,
Okay, and again, I'm not, I don't want to cause you discomfort, but
I
you wouldn't.
recognize that.
Okay. Do you remember?
I just can't quantify what kind of damage that might have done to me.
I understand. Do you remember trying to explain to Mr. Lewin in your September 4th, 2015 interview that you had concerns with your memory because, as you described it, you had a, quote, successful, end quote, drug career? Remember telling him that?
That's what I said?
Yes.
That I had a success. I must have been being ironic.
Okay.
I had to have been kidding.
Well, you don't deny you said it, though, right?
I don't remember saying that.
Okay. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
I'm more than happy to stipulate that it was said. You
Fine.
want to show me the line?
Sure.
My
Line
memory
6.
is that that's correct. We will stipulate, Your Honor, to the following. Let me just clarify that, but you know my memory, and I'm 63, and I had a successful drug career from the age of 14 to 36.
And then Mr. Lewin said, wait, a successful, what did you say? And you said drug career.
I was being facetious.
Well, were you being facetious when you told Mr. Lewin that your brain is just trashed?
I would have described it that way, but it's through terrible frustration.
Okay, but those are your words. Would you agree?
I don't remember saying them, but I take your word for it.
And Mr. Lewin, do you want to stipulate to that too?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Those were the words that she used.
And then you said, and you know, so I'm sure that has contributed to my memory. And so yeah, I'll rush into a room with a great intent and not remember why.
That happened in later years of my life, not...
Well, but that's what you were telling Mr. Lewin in
I was referring to at the time that he was speaking to me in 2015. That was happening then,
Okay,
not years ago.
fine.
It was a function of age from my perspective. That's
Okay.
what I believed.
Okay, so 6 years ago, you were worried about whether or not what you were telling Mr. Lewin was accurate. So I would assume then you'd have the same concerns today, correct?
You're characterizing it in a way that I don't think is accurate,
Okay.
which
well,
is that
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I mean, if you're trying to drive a point to the idea that I would say something that didn't happen, that's not true.
Ma'am, you're the one who brought up your concerns when talking to Mr. Lewin about your own memory.
Because my memories are not specific.
Did you not bring up to Mr. Lewin in your interview concerns about your memory?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and that's because you had concerns about your memory, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, will you take my word that you spoke to Mr. Lewin accompanied by the detective for 1 hour and 15 minutes?
Sure.
Okay, and that the word alibi was used by Mr. Lewin or by you 14 times without any mention whatsoever by you of Miss Berman making a call to Einstein,
To Einstein.
the medical school.
I didn't know about that specifically. I just knew that it was a phone call.
Right, because you didn't know about it until Mr. Lewin asked you a hypothetical, correct?
No, I knew that she
Okay.
had made a phone call.
All right, so I'm going to read to you how that went down. Okay. Mr. Lewin, Here's what he says. I want to give you a hypothetical. Knowing Susan as you did, I want you to assume that somebody close to her came to her and said, you know what, hey, listen, I want you to assume this because you know Bob Durst. You know the relationship. I want you to assume that, let's say Bob Durst came to her and said, listen, Susan, I accidentally, I got in an argument with Kathy. You know, she hit her head. I need your help. I need you to call the school and pretend to be Kathy. That's Mr. Lewin presenting a hypothetical. Now, if you had been the one to tell Mr. Lewin that she had hit her head, why would he have to present a hypothetical?
That's going to call for argument.
Argument, sustained.
Also, I object to the amount of ums. If I say
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
it's embarrassing. If I said that, it's
Yeah,
embarrassing.
no, sometimes you talk that way, Mr. Lewin. All right, go ahead.
Well, that just threw gas on the fire, Your Honor. That last one was.
Well, sometimes, I mean, that's a quote, I guess.
Well, I don't want to be accused of not being accurate.
You don't want to clean up his act for you?
Plus, it was fun to do it that way.
Yeah.
Clearly.
I could tell you're taking delight in that. Go ahead.
So, the first time during your 2015 interview that the subject of Kathy hitting her head was presented to you in a hypothetical by Mr. Lewin, correct?
Yes, I was aware it was a hypothetical.
Okay, but the first time the concept came up was through Mr. Lewin, correct?
No.
Well, if I give you a chance to read your entire 1 hour and 15-minute interview, I would ask you at the conclusion if you can point to one time that you ever told Mr. Lewin about an accident or making the phone call.
I never told him about an accident. I did tell him about making a phone call.
Okay? Again, I would be happy to give you your entire transcript
Okay,
and ask you to review it
all right,
and show me where you told Mr. Lewin about a phone call.
all right.
Would you take my word you didn't?
I
Your
would be
Honor,
surprised about that.
Mr.
The
Lewin?
objection, again, is going to call for a sidebar to explain it.
Okay,
Thank you.
sidebar. If I told you recently that I love the law, it is fascinating. Law of evidence. It's intricate.
Shall I continue?
Yes,
Okay.
you may resume your questioning.
Thank you. When Mr. Lewin gets a chance,
You'll go back to that subject.
Okay, great. Thank you.
After you've
I'll let
asked.
you know, Mr. Chesnoff, as soon as I verify.
You got it. Were you made aware by anybody in the course of your interrogations or interviews that the idea of someone calling the school was merely a theory?
When he prefaced it by saying it was a hypothetical, then obviously it would have been a theory.
Right. That it was not a concrete fact, but a suggestion, correct?
That is correct.
It might have even been, if you remember, something that was suggested in the fictional movie All Good Things, correct?
Yes.
Now, initially, Mr. Lewin said, you said to Mr. Lewin, I just don't really think I have anything of valuable or substantive to offer. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And you acknowledged that you were bad with dates, correct?
Yes.
You were bad with when events occurred, correct?
Same thing, yes.
Yeah, okay. Do you remember going to a book party for Susan at a Lower East Side restaurant called Sammy's Romanian Steakhouse?
Yes.
And do you remember that Mr. Durst is the one who threw the party and paid for it?
I did not know that.
Do you remember seeing Mr. Durst there?
No.
Do you remember going out to eat with Susan and Mr. Durst at
The Apple Pan.
Apple
Yes,
Pan,
I do.
okay? And that was here in Los Angeles?
Yes.
Okay. And this was Susan with who she described as her dearest friend, correct?
That's right.
And how deeply she loved him, correct?
Yes.
And how deeply he loved her.
Yes.
Now, earlier, I think I asked you, but I'm kind of looking again. The reason you didn't participate in the Jinx was because you were a suspect of the producers, correct?
Yes.
And you thought that they had maliciously portrayed Susan in that movie, correct?
Yeah, but there was another reason, which is that I had decided not to talk about my dead friends anymore, having done it for Gilda and John and Phil Hartman.
No, I understand that all of those things are difficult, and that's an
It
understand.
was just something, I had no interest in being a part of a documentary of that nature.
Well, if it was a documentary, or a film at least, right?
They approached me about the
Or
documentary.
they called it a documentary, correct?
I don't recall.
Mr. Chesnut?
Yes.
Ready for the stipulation?
Yes.
Your Honor, the people will stipulate that during the interview on
September,
September 4th, 2015, that Ms. Newman did not mention that the alibi involved a phone call. So stipulated?
so stipulated.
Does the court accept that stipulation?
Yes, the court accepts that stipulation.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Now, when you were talking to Mr. Lewin in September of 2051, do you remember telling him the only thing that you...
2000 when?
What did I say?
I'm just glad I'm still around. I'm almost
25.
What did I say?
Still working,
You
apparently.
said 2051. and-
2051,
and,
I'm dyslexic in my mind. In 2015, do you remember that Mr. Lewin says to you, is all that she told you, all you can describe is this term that she used, alibi, and you said, well, this is also where it gets hazy. The thing you have to know about Susan was that she was given to hyperbole. Remember telling him that?
Yes,
And the reason you told that to Mr. Lewin at the time was that you knew Susan to be a great storyteller, correct?
yeah, but when it comes to hyperbole, it was usually in the context of extolling the virtues of her friends.
Okay. But when you were talking to Mr. Lewin, it was in the context of him trying to get you to say more about what the alibi story was, and you telling him, I'm hazy, and plus, Susan often dealt in hyperbole.
Yes,
Okay. And then you go on to state, you know, she, and I swear to you, at one point, you know, she told stories about her childhood. They would get more and more inflated to where she actually said to me, you know, my family sold me to gypsies. Remember telling that to Mr. Lewin?
yes,
And that was an example of how Susan could obviously embellish or make up a story, correct?
yes,
And you also told Mr. Lewin when it came to Susan, it was hard to know what was true and what wasn't, correct?
there were times, yes,
And you also told Mr. Lewin that there came a point in time where Susan rescinded her story about the alibi. Remember that?
yes,
And that means took it back, correct?
yes,
Okay. Do you remember telling Mr. Lewin in 2015 that you didn't tell the police about Susan mentioning an alibi because you simply didn't remember it?
that's right.
Another reason that you told Mr. Lewin you didn't tell anybody about it was because Susan was so capable of hyperbole that you didn't even know what she may or may not have told you was the truth.
I said that,
Yes, you did.
okay.
We,
I don't remember thinking that about her, so
okay,
I don't
well,
remember ever thinking that Susan didn't know the difference between truth and fiction.
okay, that wasn't the question. The question was whether or not what she was telling you was truth or fiction. That's what you were explaining.
All right, but
That's-
I'm very confused by what's going on here.
Okay?
What are you
Are
you asking me?
I'm asking you, did you tell Mr. Lewin, because Susan was so capable of hyperbole, that you didn't even know what she may or may not have told you was true?
I can't believe I said that because I don't think that's true.
Okay? Well, if you said it, then It would have been mistaken?
Yeah,
So you were answering Mr. Lewin's questions about why you didn't tell anybody. You gave a detailed explanation that it was based on the fact that she was an exaggerator, and you weren't sure it was true or not, but now you're saying something different, correct?
well, but you're suggesting that I said that she didn't know what was truth and what was fiction.
No, and I apologize if I'm confusing you. Whatever Susan knew, Susan knew. The question is, there would be times where Susan would tell you something, and you didn't know whether you could believe it or not.
That's right, that's not what you said to me, though.
Oh, okay, well, I apologize. I thought that's what I said. And then you say, to bring something up about the alibi that might have just been a part of her drama queen personality and would have led to nothing was another reason I never discussed it. Remember saying that?
I remember why I said that, too.
Okay, Mr. Lewin will have a chance, but did you say it?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember telling Mr. Lewin during the interview that I feel like what I'm offering you isn't effective because I'm conflating the time?
Yes.
Okay, which means you don't really even know when you heard it, correct?
I know that I heard it when Susan had moved back to Los Angeles.
Okay, but you didn't know the month, correct?
Correct, that's
the
correct.
year?
Correct.
You didn't know whether or not it was before you read an article or watched a movie, correct?
It was before I read an article.
But you know for sure it was before you watched All Good Things?
Yeah, this was way before that.
Okay. What did you remember? What you did remember, according to you, was the alleged alibi statement was said to you a good time away from when Kathy actually disappeared. Do you remember saying that?
I don't, because I didn't know when Kathy disappeared.
Okay, so if you said that to Mr. Lewin, you would have been saying that without really having any basis to say it, correct?
Again, you know, I can't remember saying that.
Okay.
And I do know that I had no idea when Kathy disappeared. So her disappearance had no relevance to my relating the experience of what Susan said to me.
Okay.
I didn't know the story at the time.
Okay.
I didn't know anything about what had happened or what had been alleged about Mr. Durst and his wife.
Even though you watched the movie?
Years later, the movie was made years later.
And then you spoke to Mr. Lewin years later, after
Yes,
after you saw the movie, correct?
I'm not sure, when was the movie? When was my conversation with him?
We'll get a chance to show the jury when the movie was,
All right,
in relation to 2015.
all right.
Do you remember telling Mr. Lewin in September of 2015, I felt like I'm not sure it's true, referring to the alibi issue, and I don't want to, you know, put forth something that could just be nonsense?
Yes.
One moment, Your Honor. Would it refresh your recollection that the movie All Good Things was in 2010?
Okay, I didn't see it at that time. I saw it years later when it was on TV.
Okay, remember when?
I don't.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Newman, when you were contacted by myself and investigators in 2015, at that point in time, had you ever mentioned anything to any investigators regarding the information you had about Susan saying the false alibi?
Correct. I did not mention it before that conversation.
And is it fair to say that when you mentioned it, was it me telling you that you had this information, or was it you saying to me that you had the information?
It was me saying to you that I had the information.
During our interview, was it clear to you that you were giving us information about knowledge you had that we didn't know before?
I became aware of that. I was, to my chagrin, yes.
It's also fair to say that when you originally told us this information in 2015, you did not realize the complete significance.
Objection, Your Honor.
Grounds?
Overruled.
That's very accurate. I did not realize that.
And when I believe Mr. Chesnoff asked you if in fact you had said something that you weren't really sure if you had anything valuable or substantive to offer. Do you remember that question?
Yes, I do. And
Can
I
you
remember
indicate-
saying it.
Can you indicate, if you can, what did you mean by that statement?
Well, I was ashamed that, as I've said before, that I didn't appreciate the gravity of what she was saying to me, and that I blithely accepted her backtracking and rescinding. And it was almost like, I think I said this to you at the time, like the Kitty Genovese crime, where people watched as this girl was stabbed to death and did nothing.
And let me
That's what I felt like, that I had been feckless about this whole subject.
Let me ask you, Ms. Newman, when you ended up giving the information that you used, to the best of your memory, did we bring up, myself and investigators, the alibi line, or was that you that brought that up to us?
I brought it up.
Now, you were also asked several questions by Mr. Chesnoff regarding what Susan told you and your impression of what you think that she would have done for Mr. Durst. Do you recall that line of questioning that Mr. Chesnoff brought up?
Yes.
Do you recall and do you remember being asked whether or not in the context, strike that, withdraw that, I apologize. The concept of the alibi being false, was that something that you suggested or that we suggested?
It was something Susan suggested.
So in other words, was it me or the investigators telling you, hey,
No,
Laraine
it was not.
Newman, well, I know you know where I'm going, but I need to finish
Yeah.
the question. Laraine Newman, isn't it true that Susan provided you a false alibi, or did I ask the following? And in the way that she said it, this is going to be on page 15, lines 4 through 9. And in the way that she said it, was it in the context of that, was it an actual alibi or something she was doing for him that wasn't true? And you responded, it was something she was doing for him because he was her friend and she loved him. What did you mean by that?
I mean, I think it's kind of self-explanatory. I meant that if he was in need, that she would help him.
And is that what you mean today by false alibi?
Well, there are two different issues. I knew it to be a false alibi from her telling me that. But, you know, today, are you asking me if it was suggested to me that it was a false alibi? No.
No. What I'm asking you is that when you were relaying this, Mr. Chesnoff has basically said, well, when she said alibi, for all you know, she was basically just saying that she could provide Bob with a legitimate, honest alibi. Was that the context of what she told you?
No.
And if I were to ask you on a scale of 1 to 100, with 1 being, yeah, she could easily have said that, and 100 being, there's no way, what would you say?
100.
Now, you were also asked, one moment, during the interview, do you recall being asked by myself, how sure are you that Susan told you this about the alibi? Do you recall what your answer was on a scale of 1 to 100?
Yeah, I said 100.
And do you still feel that way today?
Yes, I do.
And with respect to the timing, Mr. Chesnoff has gone into detail about the fact that you do not remember when specifically Susan Berman told you this information. Is that right?
That's correct.
What was important to you and what was memorable about this, when it was she told you or what it was she said?
What it was she said.
You also were asked questions about rescinding the alibi. Do you recall Mr. Chesnoff asking about that?
Yes.
And when Susan was talking to you about rescinding the alibi, by the way, is that a subject that you brought up or that we brought up, myself and the interviewers?
It was more the idea that I think you had asked me something to the idea that why didn't you do anything about it? And I had said that she rescinded it.
And let me ask you, when you meant rescinded it, did you take her action as being a sincere statement to you of, hey, Laraine, that's not what happened? Or did you take her actions to be, uh-oh, I should not have told her that, and I'm going to try to change the
Objection,
conversation?
Your Honor.
Grounds?
Speculation, Your Honor.
Yeah, I think that she sensed that she had told me something that I didn't approve of and wanted to backpedal because she didn't want to be in trouble.
Now, you were also asked about your statement to the police in 2001, and Mr. Chesnoff pointed out that you mentioned that Susan said that Bob had bailed her out, right? That he gave her money.
Yes.
And let me ask you something. I want you to assume for a moment that you said that. We've stipulated that you said that in 2001. In any way at the time, did you connect that to Bob Durst being a suspect in her murder?
No.
Did the police in any way ask you follow-up questions connecting that to being a suspect in her murder?
No.
You were also asked if I gave you any reports or transcripts. Did I ever give you a report or a transcript and tell you, hey, Laraine, here's your script?
No.
What did I tell you about your testimony anytime that we've talked?
Just, I mean, I don't recall, actually.
Have I emphasized at all that it is important for you to just be honest to the
Yes.
best of your ability?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Chesnoff asked about the quote, I think he said 10 or 20 times that we've spoken. Other than the one conversation that you related where we went over your testimony, were the other conversations regarding strictly scheduling?
That's correct.
And in terms of what he called, quote, witness prep, did I in any way tell you this is what your testimony is to be?
No.
Did I make clear to you that if there was any information that was different, that don't worry about it being different, go ahead and tell me because we want the truth?
Yes.
Now, you've been asked about your drug use. Someone asked you, do you believe that your drug use in any way created the memory of Susan telling you that she created this false alibi?
Absolutely not.
In your life with your drug use, when you've talked about memory issues, have those been issues where you forget things that happened or that you remember things that did not?
I would forget things that did happen. I would not remember things that didn't.
So, to the best of your memory, in your going on approximately 70 years,
Gosh.
throw that out there. Well, yeah, he did the math first.
I didn't ask that question.
You need to just embrace it. In your approximately 70 years, of which, starting at age 13, for a long period of time, you did a substantial amount of drug use, are you aware of one situation in your life where you found out that a memory that you had, not one you forgot, but a memory you had, was wrong and had been shaped by drugs?
No.
You were asked about the movie All Good Things, correct?
Yes.
And did you go and see it in the theaters?
No, I saw it on TV.
And in terms of when you saw it on TV, do you have any idea if it was before 2015 or after 2015?
I don't know.
And if I were to ask you, how sure are you that your memories of what happened are based on what Susan told you versus what you might have read or seen, what would your response be?
I'm 100% sure that it's based on what happened.
Now finally, Mr. Chesnoff asked you, I think there were a couple of drugs he mentioned that I haven't even heard of. Were you a regular user frequently of LSD or other mind-altering hallucinogens?
Not a regular user, no.
And I want to ask you, are you aware of ever having a acid trip where you imagined or saw Susan Berman relating to you this tale of what happened?
Certainly not.
Now, I want to also ask you, did you ever go on an acid trip with the following people? Mela Kaufman, Linda Obst, Susie Harmon, Paul Kaufman, Robin Morse, and Ricky Ring, where you all had a hallucination about Susan telling you about a false alibi?
No.
Finally, did you ever know Susan Berman to represent Bob Durst in a bad light?
No.
Is it fair to say that Susan Berman almost worshipped Bob?
Yeah.
And as you sit here today, strike that. In terms of the testimony that you have provided, have you done your best to be as truthful as you can?
Yes, I have.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Chesnoff.
Just a couple.
How do you know you don't have false memories if they're false?
Good point.
Thanks. Mr. Lewin started out by talking to you about, what's the word he used, about the alibi, a fake alibi. We're going to do this again. At any time in your September 2015 interview, did you ever talk about a fake alibi?
I didn't characterize it that way.
Okay, so let's talk exactly what happened. Mr. Lewin asked you, was she saying in the this is page 15, Mr. Lewin, the same page you were on.
Sure.
Or was she saying in the context of basically, I provided Bob an alibi, whether or not? No, she said she provided an alibi. And then he says, and in the way that she said it, was it in the context of an actual alibi or something she was doing for him that wasn't true? And this is what you said. It was something she was doing for him because he was her friend and she loved him.
That's right.
Okay. No word false in there anywhere,
That's
correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I have nothing further.
So I just want to go to that last question that you just asked. So
Is that all right?
the second part
Okay.
that
Just wanna make
you
sure.
agreed with, let me go back, where was, that was on page 15, is that right?
Same one you
One
quoted.
second, hold on.
Right here, buddy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, the question was, the way she said it to you, was she in essence saying, hey, listen, Bob was with me, so therefore he couldn't have done this? Or was she saying in the context of, basically, I provided Bob an alibi, whether or not, so you were given a choice of one, correct, being an actual alibi,
Yeah.
and the second, did you take that to mean a false alibi?
Objection
Yes.
leading, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Yeah, I did.
And in fact, your answer was not, no, she told me that's what happened. Your answer was, quote, no, she said she provided an alibi, correct?
Yes.
Finally, Ms. Newman, have you ever sat around having a conversation with any of the 7 people that I just mentioned? I asked you if you ever had an acid trip with them, where you all had a trip where Susan was came in a vision talking about calling Einstein or making alibis, etc. Have you ever had a conversation with any of those people regarding Susan Berman providing a false alibi for Bob Durst?
No, I haven't.
And Last question. Prior to coming to court, Ms. Newman, did you express the idea that not only did you not want to come to court, that you wished that you wouldn't have even had and communicated the information that you did?
Yes, I did express that.
As you sit here today, do you still feel the same way?
God, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, you may, Mr. Chestnut.
Next, putting aside acid for a minute.
And I quote,
Yeah. Okay. Putting aside acid, if a lawyer gives you a hypothetical and it contains facts that you've never expressed to that person before he gives you the hypothetical, would you at least agree that it was suggestive?
That's argumentative.
Sustained.
it's
No,
also circuitous, I mean,
Yeah.
It's
It's
okay.
not to be answered. I
Yeah.
sustain the objection to the question.
Thank you, Ms. Newman.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. You're
Thank
now
you so much.
excused. And you both parties excused without,
Yes, Your Honor. She's excused.
maybe excused, Mr. Chestnut?
Yes, sir.
Yes, okay, you are excused, yes. Is it Thursday?
That was close. We barely made it.
All right.
Your Honor, with the court for record keeping, can we please mark the stipulated report and the 2015 transcript for the record?
No, it's not.
We'll address that
Okay.
at our next opportunity.
Okay.
When the jurors have departed, we resume, let's see, Monday at 9 o'clock. So on this weekend, so if you're traveling, travel safely. And don't talk about the case or any of the people or any subject involved in it with anyone, including the other jurors. Don't make up your mind about any issue until you discuss the case with other jurors during deliberations. Don't converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with the case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case. I know you wouldn't tweet or go on social media about your experience here. So I just am reminding you. So I look forward to seeing you on Monday at 9 o'clock. You're excused. Everything that you used is part of the record. Yeah.
Your Honor, I don't know if the court can let us know, but I know that Mr. Abramson had asked to speak to the court.
Yep.
And is that anything that can be shared with us?
Nope.
Okay, that's what I just wanted to check.
No, it's a private matter regarding Mr. Durst and.
Oh, okay. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure. Thank
Sure.
you, Your Honor.
Mm-hmm.